Marcus, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us again. Hopefully everything is as well as it can be in Madrid, but no doubt you'll mention that in the next few minutes while we're talking together. But we asked you if you would reflect on hyper-anxiety in a hysterical world. That sounds quite almost quite a frightening thing, perhaps, but certainly something that's full of interest. So I'm going to hand over everything to you and sit back and listen to some of the comments that you have to make about the situation as we find it today, and particularly, reflecting on the fact that Let's Talk Leadership is very much about supporting young leaders. So over to you, Marcus. Great to see you.
Great to see you again, Matthew, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about something that we find hard to accept. When the flood of emotions hit us, we start doing things that may not be very intelligent, and it doesn't matter how high your IQ is, you end up doing things that you later on regret. You've lost your composure. And we see this everywhere. We see this with our kids, we see this with our siblings, people watching the news with the current situation we are all facing. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about this, and hopefully we can find some exercises, some practices, and hopefully we'll offer you an opportunity to reflect and see how you respond to situations. So once again, I'm really, really excited to be here. So let me start off by asking the audience, and you, Matthew, will hysteria work in that situation? We've got a Maasai and a lion. Will that work?
Well, I think if I turned and ran like mad in a blind panic, it probably wouldn't take long for the lion to track me down.
So running is not a good strategy, is it?
Doesn't seem like it, no. I suppose if that's water in the background, I could rush into the sea and hope that the lion couldn't swim.
That's an option. Now, looking into the distance between you and the lion, how long do you think the lion will take before it bites you?
Oh, I think nanoseconds, knowing me.
Well, there you go, nanoseconds. So option number 2, which is to run to the sea, although logically seems like a good solution because we know lions are not good swimmers, doesn't seem to be a good choice given the distance and the challenge that the Maasai is facing.
So what would happen if I just stood very still and tried to sort of outstare the lion?
Well, that is something really interesting, because 2 things that the Maasai is doing is standing still and breathing. His eyes are on the lion.
Yeah.
He's not looking anywhere else. He's just focused, centered, staring at the lion. Now, how often when we find things that we don't like, we just start running in panic, or we just close our eyes and we don't want to see, we go into denial and to ignoring or blaming the system or blaming the world. Do you think blaming the lion is going to work and say, well, hang on, Mr. Lion, you shouldn't be there. I mean, I don't want to hurt you. I mean, why me? Didn't you have breakfast today? I mean, I'm skinny. Why don't you go to this guy over here? He's got more weight and he's more delicious. We sometimes get into that kind of behavior, don't we?
Yeah, a lot of the time, yeah.
A lot of the time. So how do we survive? That's the key question. How do we survive the tsunami of emotions that we are living in? You watch the news and it's very difficult to stay neutral. Whether you are jumping in your couch saying, yes, go for it, or you say, no, that's a disaster. You take sides, but it's very difficult to find anyone who's calm, who is posed, who keeps his or her composure. It's kind of difficult, isn't it? So one of the things that we have discovered, and when I say we is with the team of scientists with whom I work, is that we are wired to connect. That is one way that the human race has survived. It's natural for us to collaborate. It's natural for us to socialize. Our brain is a social machine. So we see 2 people there, red and blue. Now, if I showed this slide in the US, people would immediately or probably would add an interpretation. Red represents whatever, blue represents whatever. My point of view, your point of view, I am right, you are wrong. And yet we start separating, don't we? And yet in business, we say, let's collaborate. So when the fire hits us, are we really collaborating or are we just protecting ourselves? So the interesting thing about that is that one of the key questions that I'm going to borrow from Professor Clark, with whom I'm working in the US, he actually asked me this question very recently, which I thought is a great question. And I want the audience and you to think, in my work, at home, with my friends, is it expensive to be myself? Can I freely express my feelings, my thoughts, my doubts, my vulnerability, Brené Brown, my vulnerability? Or is it work a place where I need to pretend that I just flow or fit or comply, and it's too expensive to be myself? It could be socially, I could be ostracized, politically, I could be, like we say in Spain, economically, I could get fired. You know, what are the dangers of being myself? And we see this a lot in social media. You need to become something rather than yourself.
I think also for young people, young leaders, people who are in their first roles of responsibility, it's pretty tough to ask them to take that risk of being themselves totally if they're worried that more senior colleagues, more experienced colleagues might look at them and say, that's not the way we behave around here, or those aren't the thoughts that we're expecting you to have. We want you to do this, we want you to do that. In other words, perhaps do something that's not you, perhaps behave in a way that's not you. That must be quite tough.
And you know, we sadly, we start to see escalation of bullying, harassment, humiliation, finger pointing, isolating. And I'm not talking about social distancing. I'm talking about social isolation. You don't belong. You're not like me. So everything that we're seeing in the world, you know, are we including? Are we excluding? Do we make space for diversity? All of that. And when we go into a situation like the one we are facing, it's very easy to start letting the flood of emotions dictate our behavior. So we feel safe by surrounding ourselves with equal. Because it's so dangerous out there that I just want to surround with equal. So I have no room for any divergence. I have no rooms for any disagreement. I don't know, and I don't have the energy to deal with conflict. Just obey, just fit into the thing. So as you see, the paradox is that we all look for cues of safety before connecting with someone else and engaging with someone. Now, if I lose my composure and you want to collaborate with, you're going to have second thoughts about collaborating with me.
Very much so, yeah.
Very much so. You're just going to say, what's wrong with this guy? I mean, he's shouting, he's threatening me. In Spain, we've got the finger, and don't do this, and don't do that. And, you know, it's threatening. So we go into reading our cues of it. So our autonomic nervous system, what it does is actually reading 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Is this safe? Am I surrounded by safe people? Am I in a safe environment? And there's only two options. It's safe or if it's not safe. If it's not safe, I'm going to put all my energy in protecting myself.
Yeah, understandable.
And I'm going to go into flight, fight, freeze, fawn, whatever it takes in order to protect myself. And I can justify that behavior by saying, well, I need to belong. I need to fit. I'm looking after my family. I want to secure my job. And all that is run by the reading that it's no longer safe to be myself in this current. Now, the funny thing is that if you feel safe, your energy goes to performance. It's a natural thing. I feel safe, I relax now. What do I do with all my energy? I just perform. Yeah. So I go into performance. And that's one of the things that I want to do, perform. So I engage with others and I naturally. So it's important to be seeing these cues around us with people. So let me ask you a question. What would be a cue for me not to do that might generate in you discomfort or uncertainty?
I think if you started getting worried about something that I wasn't worried about or that I hadn't even thought about, I might start to get quite anxious because I'd be thinking, hold on, I know Marcus, and Marcus is not normally like this, but something's triggered some behavior in him, and things aren't right. And do I need to be paying attention to it? And what's happening? And what does he know that I don't? And I think it would. I think if you could trigger off anxiety in me if you started behaving in a way that I wasn't expecting.
And we get into funny things like this, threat-based mindsets. I'm getting this word from Graham, and she drew this very interesting thing that happens in our dialogue. If I go into fight, you're wrong, I'm right. And how often do we see this happening nowadays?
Yep, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. We watch the news, we're at a dinner table, we're talking to a colleague, we're fighting, we're no longer collaborating. Fear is something that is triggering our behavior. Flight, let's talk about something else. Let's avoid the conversation. And how often in business we just turn away from that uncomfortable situation. What that hides is this fear that we're feeling. So we just take a strategy to protect us, which is, I'm going to step away from it. I don't want to get into trouble. We can freeze, and then I don't talk. I don't seem to be listening. I'm just like paralyzed by the whole thing. Or phone is performance surface level of engagement, which is in business is called plain politics. I'm just pretending.
Yeah, you just pretend you're engaged, pretend that you agree with everything, and you just keep your head down. And
exactly. So, well, let's watch a video, because this is very, very interesting. What happens when we see or when we feel fear? And in this case, it's a research that started off in 1968. So the footage is in white and black, and it happens in a lift. So we're going to see 3 individuals, and what happens in the individuals where there's group pressure. So they are going to trigger the fear of not belonging, of being singling out, of being different. Right. Let's see, intelligent people, how do they react when the absurd takes place?
Okay.
So I hope you find it interesting. Oops, about that.
Don't worry, these things happen. Otherwise, we're all going to start getting anxious, and then,
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with a white shirt, the lady with a trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Now, here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First, he makes a full turn to the rear, and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
So it's a funny video. You can find it on YouTube. So, but the interesting thing is that an anecdote was with the lockdown here in Spain. I was in the supermarket, and I was walking by an aisle, and then I saw this lady with, I don't know how many toilet papers, must have been like 200. My immediate thought is how ridiculous this behavior is. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. But then a second later, I started to wonder, well, this lady may know something that I don't know. Maybe I should be buying that much toilet paper myself. And then I saw 3 other people buying toilet paper like mad. And I said, God, there's now 4 people buying. They must know something that I don't know. Therefore, I, put on lots of toilet paper. And when my wife came up to me, she said, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't know. Everybody seems to be putting toilet paper here, so maybe, you know, and then she said, put that back on the shelves. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, this is not the end of the world. So, you know, that happened to all of us, I suspect. And so, any thoughts around that video, Matthew? Any?
Well, only that I'm sure we all do it. You know, maybe it's not a lift scenario, but our natural tendency, particularly in new situations, is probably to try and fit in, to try and not stand out too much as being different, you know, because that's just part of our human nature, that when we're not sure of something, we tend to just follow the crowd, even though we might think that the crowd's going in the wrong direction, or maybe they're doing something in a way that we don't think is sensible. Rather like your wife saying, for goodness sake, you know, put the toilet rolls back. You know, what are you doing? The world's not ending tomorrow. You know, that sort of reality check sometimes has to kick in, but often after we have actually just gone with the flow because that seemed to be the okay thing to do at the time. And then afterwards we kick ourselves and think, well, why on earth didn't I say something? It seemed stupid at the time, or it didn't seem like a good idea. So, you know.
And you know, but the interesting thing is that I was, as we say in Spain, I was slave of my own emotions. I was carried away by my emotions. And my wife, she was not. She was pretty calm, very centered. And she looked at me and said, what are you doing? Yeah. And it's just, she helped me ground back into reality. Said, yeah, good question. What am I doing? You know, what am I doing? So the theme of our talk is, how often do we allow emotions take us away from our center and our ability to discern and to meditate our responses to situations. Now, in business, this is a research from Arau and Clemens, where what they are doing here is they are trying to come up with new rules of engagement when people engage in conversations, which is very, very interesting, because they are proposing a new thing. And you and I, we work with lots of executives, and we typically start off our work with them by establishing and agreeing on some ground. So I thought these were very interesting new ground rules to consider. The first one is, from agree to disagree to controversy with civility.
Yeah.
Because very often when we agree to disagree, we start playing politics, and we, yeah, very nice, but we don't really voice our thoughts on things. So controversy, yes, let's have that friction, that heat in the conversation, but let's not forget of civility.
And in adaptive leadership terms, which is something else we've been talking about on Let's Talk Leadership, that would be having a courageous conversation. So having some controversy, having the opportunity to disagree with someone, but not on a personal basis, but to challenge the thinking without allowing the personal relationship to get, you know, without having a negative impact on the personal relationship, to be able to have that discussion that could be seen by others listening to it as being quite controversial, expressing views that are very different to someone else's.
Spot on. And that leads us to the second ground rule. From do not take things personally to observe your intentions and impacts. Just be mindful. Did I say the thing that I said in a way that came across offensive? Do I need to apologize? Was I being aggressive in my putting things across? You know, I'm very often, and I come from the Mediterranean area, we take things personally. It's, even if you say a good thing, and you say, well, I like your shirt. Why do you like my shirt? Is anything wrong with my shirt? No, I just wanted to say I like your shirt. Really? Okay, well, I'm going to keep an eye on you. And just, you know, so, you know, don't take things personally. And you've worked a lot in the Middle East, and, you know, you're an expert on that. And, you know, sometimes people just overreact, and, you know, you have to be really careful. The third rule that they propose around clemency is from challenge by choice to choose your challenges.
Yeah, yeah. So not to try and fight every battle, not to challenge everything because you're likely to be seen as someone who just challenges for the sake of challenging, but decide when and where it's appropriate for you to say something different, or make a case for doing something different, or to make a case for not doing what's being proposed.
Exactly. Spot on.
Yeah.
And the last one is respect, from respect to respect mindfully.
Yeah.
How often have we seen on the flip chart respect, and then you have to really ask questions, but what do you mean by respect, and how do you know if you're respect? What are you respecting? Are you respecting the person and disrespecting the idea, or are you respecting the idea and disrespecting the person? So it's a very interesting transition into all of that. Go ahead.
Marcus, I was going to say, given the time, I know you wanted to show us a simple exercise, really, for when we are in a situation when we're feeling a bit overwhelmed, what we can do just to stabilize ourselves and get a little bit of equilibrium back into our mindset and into our way of being. So I think probably just to finish off for the moment, because we're going to come back to this lots of times, if we can just have a look at what you're suggesting and how it helps, that would be great.
Okay, so let's practice two things. The first one is very, very simple. This exercise is all around breathing.
Yeah.
Breathing, the rhythm and the depth of breathing has an impact in your behavior. So physiology has an impact on behavior.
Right.
I'm drawn away by my emotions, I'm not balanced, I'm going to behave in the way we said we would behave. Like we've seen the lift and we've seen the sort.
Yeah.
So this is an instant rebalancing exercise when you are carried away by negative. So you inhale at a count of 4, and then you exhale on a count. And it only takes about a minute. So let's give it a go, and maybe we can do it with the audience. So at your own rhythm and pace, just through your nose, inhale and count 4 seconds, or maybe it's less seconds, and try to relax your body. And you exhale initially through your mouth, so we can activate the relaxation in your body on the count of 8. You inhale, 4.
Gosh, yes, you can feel it. You just feel it working straight away.
Straight away. It takes no more than a minute.
Yeah.
So tennis players use this. Golf players, footballers, when they're about to kick a penalty, they do some breathing exercises. Maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly, but what they're doing, they're bringing balance. They need their focus. They need to be centered. They need to be. So that's a very easy exercise. No counter effects. You can teach it to your children, elderly, whatever. The only limitation is if anyone has got any problems with the heart, then they need to consult with a physician and see if they're safe in doing this exercise. But if you are okay with your heart and you don't have any illnesses, this is a very, very safe exercise. I know leaders that they do this in the opening of their meetings. They just follow this exercise for 1 minute, and it's magical. It's like all the negativity starts to dissipate, all the tension starts to dissipate, and then people are focused, people are more relaxed, and then can have a meaningful conversation.
Marcus, this has been great. I think we call it time at this point, because we've shared, or you've been kind enough to share some really interesting facts with us and some research with us, and given us an exercise that we can use when we're feeling in a situation where things are getting a bit out of control emotionally for us. So it's been really useful. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you. It's always good fun to chat with you. And we must do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I hope and I'm thrilled to know that only in a few seconds you saw the change in your body. So thank you for inviting me. I see your dog there. Hello.
Yeah, she's barking because she wants to get out on a walk. So.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So enjoy your walk.
Okay. Anyway, take care.
You too, Matthew.
Keep safe. Thank you so much.
Great seeing you again.